Welcome, Immortalites, to another round of the conversations. We're back again. It's been a little bit of a while. Today I have TJ Doerfel, also known as Sir TJ The Wrathful. He is the, I don't know what you'd call yourself, one of the frontmen of the Doerfels band, perhaps, and also the host of the Doerfelverse. Probably the best way to introduce you is like part of the most American story I've ever heard. Like, what's going on with you and your family is so crazy. It's almost like you're right out of the Dukes of Hazzard, coming from here from an Australian perspective. Could you maybe just give a quick intro to yourself, maybe a bit about your family as well, before we get into like the music, value for value, and all those sorts of fun things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, my family, I was the oldest of 10 kids in our family, and my mother loved music, and so did my dad, and she got us into music as young kids, and they found out me and my siblings were fairly musical at young ages, and the next thing you know, we're just learning music, having fun. People ask us to play, and as we get older and older, so I was probably 12 when we started playing gigs. So I think it was the year 2000, and there's just me and my sister, my mom and dad, because all the other kids were real little. And the next thing you know, we're all grown up, and all the little kids are starting to pick up instruments. And the short story is, we just turned into a family band and started traveling the country and playing shows. Bluegrass mainly was what we started with.
Yeah, and you were based in New York, right, at the start?
Yep, we're from Buffalo, New York area. So don't think New York City. It's much more country, like Niagara Falls.
Gotcha.
Much more, yeah. And so it's pretty much in the country, and a lot like where I am now in Tennessee, actually. So really, really nice.
Yeah, and have you guys always been based around that? I don't know what you call it, the East Coast, lower East Coast, perhaps, of the states, because you were in Florida for a while as well.
Yeah. So our family, my parents were born and raised in the Buffalo, New York area, and that's where I was raised until about we were 16, when we talked my dad into quitting his job and selling the house, buying a bus, and living in it, and traveling and playing in a band. Yeah, I don't know how we did. I don't know how we did it, but we talked him into doing that. And then after touring on the motorhome, all over the country, up and down, side both ways, we then landed in Florida, where we got started playing a lot of shows there. And as we got older, we were like, we'd like to travel a little less, and Florida became home base. And we were in Florida for almost 10 years playing in, have you ever heard of the Florida Keys? It's kind of like a tourist.
I've heard of it. I
most
wouldn't be
southern
able to point
point.
it out on a map.
Yeah, you're good. It's the most southern point in the United States. We had joked that we were closer to Cuba than we were to Walmart, which technically was true.
That's pretty impressive, because Walmart seems to be everywhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were in. We stayed in Big Pine Key, which is 30 miles from Key West, and it's a string of islands. From basically ends at Miami and goes all the way down. Then there's just islands, and you're taking bridges for like 100 miles, just bridge to little island, all the way to Key West. And so we were for about at mile marker 30. And that's where we were home base for about 10 years, playing. And it was nice because instead of traveling all over the country to going to people, all the people from all over the country, all over the world, really came to us.
Yeah, so that's the go.
It's kind of cool.
That does seem like one of the most exhausting parts of being a musician, is at least nowadays, because it's changed a lot with the like streaming royalties, the whole music business, where it seems like the money seems to be made with touring. Look at Taylor Swift right now, if you want, for example, and she's just going everywhere in the world. And I'm sure it's fun for a certain stage, but I went for a trip around Latin America for 14 months, and I was exhausted. Probably after about 9 months, I started to get like, oh man, I'm getting a bit tired, just moving from place to place and having to pack up, and yeah, it's just like not having that kind of home base. Really, you really feel it, definitely.
Oh yeah, it's I'm trying to think nowadays, if the band wanted to play again, we would never want to do it in that way. We did it in a way that was like very we lived in a van down by the river. That's what it felt like. It's just and as little kids, it was like kind of all we knew, and so it like worked and it was cool. But as we got older and older, we're like, this is getting more and more uncomfortable. This isn't that fun.
Yeah, start having family and you're like, oh geez, this
it's like like the bands in the motorhome. I get a little van for my family and we follow them. It's like, maybe. And but it was actually amazing though. We did so many cool things, met so many people, and had a great time playing music. But the in-between parts were definitely a lot of work. And once it sort of started making less sense financially and just with, I don't know, sort of mentally, wearing down on you, we just started slowing down all that and morphing into making a home base. And that ended up being Florida Keys.
Yeah,
for
brilliant.
10 years.
Brilliant. And you moved to Nashville eventually to try and make it, I suppose, as a musician, as the band. But that might be skipping forward a bit. I'd really like to jump pretty much right near the beginning in terms of what musically, like what initially drew you to music. 'Cause you're the oldest of the 10 siblings, so you're kind of the almost the trailblazer in a way. And you really wanted to learn the banjo, right? Is that because there was your mom and dad were already having like music around the house? That was there just a banjo laying around? What was the
there's really two factors. Yeah, there's two factors to this. One was definitely my mom, who went to school to be a music teacher. She never graduated, but she loved music and she played the piano and she just loved all music. And then the other factor is when we were little, our families became really good friends with this other family, the Fonda family. So maybe you've heard of Ryan Fonda. He's quite popular.
Just humming Castaway.
I thought you were. That's awesome. And so we became friends with the Fonda family, their parents were extremely musical. Voices like no other, like amazing voices, and that all got passed down to their kids. So my mom, loving music, started. She was starting to learn the guitar, and then she found a banjo when I was 8. Started learning that, and then so while that's all happening, we were already starting to play a little bit of music in church with our friends, the Fondas, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and our friends, the Fondas, they did like contemporary music and in church or whatever, and so I was like interested in the drum set at 6 years old. And my friend Miles Fonda, Ryan's eldest brother, he was playing the drums too. And so whenever we go to their houses, we'd all play the drum set. And then Miles's dad was like, hey, your son's doing okay at that. Maybe you should get him a drum set. And somehow my mother allowed it, and we got a drum set, a real drum set, not an electronic one where you put your headphones on and be like, okay, yeah, don't bother me, kid. No, like the real ones.
My mom
in her living room.
Yeah, my mom was a music teacher as well, and
nice.
I think how old was I? I would have been around 12 when I got a proper drum kit as well, and yeah, that thing was loud.
Yeah.
It was proper loud.
Yeah, and my mom did, try to teach us piano and stuff because she was mainly a piano teacher, and most of us were like not really interested in the piano. None of us really took to it. While some of us can play now, it wasn't till after learning the drums and then switching to somehow bluegrass instruments we sort of went from playing drums to all of a sudden morphing into my mom found a banjo and fiddles and mandolins and all that. And then later we started learning more contemporary music because we got so into music that we wanted to learn everything we could. And that's when we could learn other instruments too. But so it really started with my mom being love of music and wanting to be a music teacher, and she essentially was. And then also our friends, the Fondas, who were really musical. And when we'd hang out with them, we were always playing music with them. And so that scene was kind of how we were raised. Like at home, we were homeschooled. So that gave us even more free time, like to practice and play around with music. And a bunch of us were super into it. Like we'd play our instruments for like 4 or 5 hours a day, like every day for years. We just loved it. I mean, we grew up on a farm too. So it wasn't like we lived in a neighborhood where we could go play with like a bunch of kids outside. We were miles from like anyone else around. So
yeah,
maybe that's one reason why we're like, oh, music's fun, something to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's really interesting because when I compare it to somewhat of my story with music and even just some sports in general, my dad was a real big tennis player, and so I was playing tennis for a fair while. And it was when I got to about 12 years old where it was almost like an inflection point of I need to start making decisions of what I really enjoyed. So I was playing tennis and soccer, and it was just like too much. I needed to really pick one that was starting to conflict. So I ended up playing soccer instead of tennis. And music, it was kind of similar, but I never had the real passion for it that unfortunately my mom would have loved me to have. Similar thing, like we had a piano in our house, never really got into it that much. Drums, it was okay. I enjoyed some aspects of playing on my own, but I get real nervous when I'm in performing, like in front of a crowd and whatnot. So being in the school band was actually I quite disliked it. It made me nervous.
So you had to play some music in school? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Like
so,
younger?
Yeah, so I mean, just in Australia, like you kind of do music class and just general, so everyone has a go at like the recorder, for example. Every family is inflicted with the the piercing notes. Yeah. And then when I went to high school, I did music as well and played drums. It was really fun. I remember one time when I was in the in the school band, and I'd kind of graduate. There was other percussionists there, but then they left, and so I was probably like 14, 15, and I was the lead drummer or something. And I remember the conductor, the teacher, kind of pulled me aside one day. He's like, "All right, Karen, like you've graduated, you've moved up. You have the most important job in the band, like to keep the beat, to you need to be really like, it's all the linchpin." I think it was meant to be inspirational, but man, it scared the shit out of me. I was like, oh no, too much responsibility.
Did you get to play like a drum set, or was it like a certain drum, like a kind of drum?
No, I'd play a bit of everything. So they had like the what are those big round one timbalers, something like that.
Yeah. So more like the big giant school band, not like band, not
proper
like rock band.
Like
that's what it's like here too. I was like, oh, maybe you actually got a drum set in school now. That wouldn't that be cool? Oh no.
Yeah. We did have a drum set in the actual school. Yeah.
For like jazz band and stuff. But something like that.
Yeah, it was, and so, yeah. So we would play different types of music, but it was. I don't know. Honestly, I've tried to forget like a lot of that. I never really enjoyed
like,
it. Yeah, but I was curious. So, what's like the age differences between you and your brothers and sisters and sister? It's pretty close, right? You're all a couple of years apart, or like 2 years.
Yeah, for the most part.
Down.
So let's see. I'm the oldest. I'm trying to think of how old we are now. I'm 35, and my youngest brother is, I think he's 18.
Yeah.
So it would have been.
That's pretty close. Yeah.
Let's see if I can do it. TJ, Kim, Bobby, Eddie, Joey, Ben, Kurt, Garrett, Tommy, Charlie.
Nice.
I think that was 10. I don't know. I'm trying to think. So my sister's like, 2 years younger than me, and then it's like a year and a half, 2 below her, and so it's always usually around a year and a half to 2. And as it gets toward the end, I think it spread out even more, like 3 years between them or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the joke is that my parents, my mom, wanted more girls because there was me first, then my sister, and then 8 boys after that.
Yeah.
So the joke is she wanted another girl but never got one.
I was doing the math the other night. I'm like, 2 to the power of 8. That's like, a 1 in 100 and 256 chance or something. Like it's getting pretty up there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, the odds are getting against you when you're when you're at that stage. So did you ever have like an inflection point you feel where it was music, you needed to make a decision of like if you're going to play music or hockey, for example, or anything like that?
Yes, definitely. There's kind of two of them. At one point, I think I was 12 is when I got serious about practicing, like really serious. Like I'm actually going to sit down, take the time, and I can do what anyone else does if I put the time into it. It was sort of my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was when I was like, I'm going to work at it a lot. And then probably when we got my dad to quit his job, that was like, all right, we're going to do this. Because I remember thinking for a short time, like, oh, maybe I should think about going to college for like music education and be a music teacher or something if I had to, or go that route. And then with all my younger brothers being so good and ready to go, when dad was willing to quit his job and like book shows and all this stuff, we were like, or we can just keep doing this because it's happening. Like people are already calling us and asking to play. Like without us even promoting ourselves, we were getting calls and playing almost every weekend, like even just locally or somewhat, a few hours away. So it was just kind of like, you know how a lot of bands, it's like, okay, let's be a band. Okay, now we got to find shows. So you got to like go out and ask to play. Like here's,
Hmm.
you know, we were getting calls, and so it was happening naturally. So I was kind of like, when my dad was willing to quit his job and take us on the road, I was like, well, full send, full
Yeah,
send.
I'm in.
I don't know what's gonna happen, but
Yeah,
we didn't. It wasn't really. I was young enough that I was like, I felt like I had the whole world to gain. You know, it was like, you know, I can do it. We can do this. You know, very excited.
yeah,
And it wasn't until probably mid-20s I was like, well, I don't know if it's going quite how I thought, but it's something.
definitely. You mentioned your brothers were really good at that stage, and I'm curious about all the practice and training that probably went on behind the background. You mentioned, 4 hours a day, which is, if you do that for a couple of years, you're going to get really good at whatever it is that you're doing. Were you all kind of on the same level in terms of how much you enjoyed it and practice and train? Were there some your sister Kim, for example, her voice is amazing.
Mm.
Uh, were there any of you who just kind of got things easier and others who had to really struggle and work at it?
Oh, most definitely. Some of us, we were fairly natural at it, but had to practice a lot. I was one of those people. My sister, I'd say, was one of those people. I mean, her singing was definitely natural, but her playing the fiddle was a lot of practice. And then, however, I'm not to say that my brothers Ed and Ben did not practice, because they definitely did, but they picked it up. I remember being frustrated, even, in 16, 17, they were probably, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And I remember being frustrated, like, man, I practiced for like 4 or 5 hours a day, like for years. And they just now, like, and I remember showing them how to play some stuff on the guitar. And now they're like, they're just like 13, 14, like better than me. And I'm like, what? That's not fair.
Yeah.
Like you could see it, that they were just incredibly natural. And I think, though, being raised and seeing it, like when they were little, like we were playing as a band out places. So they were like it was this like soaking into them. They didn't even know it, maybe.
Yeah.
And then plus they were talented, like naturally talented anyways. So that, I think, played a factor. But yeah, I would have to say that some of us, um, it was natural. Some of it was not as natural, but we had it. And then some of us didn't want anything to do with it. That would be like my brother Bobby, my brother Garrett. They're the two that don't really play at all. Not to say that they couldn't; they just really didn't want to.
Hmm.
Um, and so no one was really forced to. But however, when when your mom and dad and everyone's making a living playing music on a bus, and you're still like in the middle of in that 10 kids, like you kind of have to follow along.
Pretty much, yeah.
At one point, I think later on when the band was going strong, my brother Bobby didn't want to. He ended up staying with my aunt for a while. He just didn't want it all. I think he was a mid-teenager, staying with my aunt and just going to school, because he just didn't want any part of it. So he like wasn't forced to, but we had to kind of figure out, like, okay, how the band's happening and we're doing pretty well for what it was. So it's like, how are we going to help the kids that don't want to play, like, have a life,
Exactly,
So
yeah.
so it was definitely a challenge, and I don't think there's any like perfect way to go about it, but it was definitely, my parents definitely cared about all of them, and all of us, and tried to figure it out as they went. I always tell my children, and my dad told me this. It's funny. It was, I've never been a parent before. Okay, y'all are my first. You're my first. Like, I'm the oldest, so it's like I'm the firstborn. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And and while he definitely taught me to respect him and everything, I also he also gave, it would be like, hey, I'm sorry when I do screw up. I'm just doing my best too. And so a lot of respect. So a lot of respect for my dad. And looking back now, he's like one of my best friends right now. So it's like, my parents were strict for us older ones, and then as the kids, as they had more kids, you could definitely see it was like less strict and stuff, and so they got away with a lot more. But either way, my dad definitely was very caring about each and every one of us, and so it was a really good experience.
It's a weird experience as you just get older and you realize, oh geez, my parents were, this age right now when they had me, and man, I don't have all my shit together.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing it with 10 kids, man, that's it's very, very impressive to, I mean, maintain some sanity, I guess, just in the cacophony of what would have been just a turbulent time. And maybe intentionally so. Some people really thrive on that. When it came to practicing as well, Was it more of an individual thing in terms of you're all just working on your own sort of skills and then you get together as a band to practice, or I'm curious as to how that evolution of individual talents really merge together and to form a band, and who gets to play guitar, who gets to do this sort of music or this instrument.
Yeah, it was really a mix of, when we were just getting going, and I just started getting serious, maybe, at the banjo, a lot of like just personal time with me and the banjo. And then once we could get, like the guitar to play, my mom played guitar at first, my dad played bass, and those things are a little more simpler than like taking solos on a banjo or on a fiddle. So once we could, because they're just rhythm. I mean, they can take solo, you can take a bass solo, but they didn't learn that stuff. They just learned how to back us up. So if you could learn like 3 or 4 chords on a guitar and kind of learn the structure where those chords are on a bass, like he played a stand up bass, and if you have some rhythm, you can kind of fall into place. So then it'd be like, so we'd spend a lot of time practicing our individual instruments, like me and my sister would. And then my mom, being a music, education major, kind of knew how to fit in and fall in the background, even though she wasn't, like taking lead solos or anything and doing complicated stuff, just falling back in the rhythm. And I think for all my brothers, the ones that loved it, which ended up being the ones that loved it the most were me, my brother Ben, and my brother Ed. And I think Kurt grew to love it too. Joey, looking back, I think he agrees that he didn't like it at the time, and now he's like, I miss it, So he's like, I didn't know how good I had it, kind of thing. But and I think he said that on the podcast, stuff like that. So I'm not trying to speak for him, but he's openly said stuff like that. So it's just kind of, while it was all happening, it was like kind of like you're in a family band, you got all these brothers playing. It's like, hey, Joey, come play bass. I remember. So Joey, he was one of the ones, Joey and Kurt, they were one of the ones that me, Ed, and Ben picked out to say, hey, you're going to play this part. You're like, hey, we need a drummer. We want to play drums. We want to start playing rock and roll. And Kurt was probably, 10, 11 years
he's
old.
Walking like, by the side of the bus or something.
We're like,
literally
we're like a gang.
And chuck it out.
Here's your drum set. Strap them in. But they were naturally good though. They had talent. Even Joey, we did that with him on the bass. We were starting to play more complicated acoustic stuff, and we were like, my dad was doing a great job holding down the beat, just boom, 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 like bluegrass kind of simple rhythm. But when we started to do more things, we were like, I wonder if Joey could play bass. And we'd start saying, hey, Joey, try doing it. And once we kind of got pretty good at our instruments, we could sort of pick up and do like a bass. We can all play bass and some stuff. So it's like, hey, Joey, see if you can do this on the bass. And we show him, and then he could he picked it up really quick. And so within, months, he's probably, maybe a half a year, he was probably getting better than our dad, who had been playing bass for years. Now our dad, I got to give him a lot of credit, because it's not like he was sitting at home practicing and soaking all this in all day. He was before we got to go, before he quit his job to go do that, he was a contractor building houses and putting roofs on and all that stuff, like 5-6 days a week. So I mean, he had his hands full.
Yeah.
So he did an awesome job. But yeah, there was definitely some of us loved it more. Some of us spent way more time personally. And then when we'd get together, it was really fun. And then there were some of us that were like, hey, you're here. Hey, you're actually pretty good. We're getting you to play. So you're in. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I guess what else am I doing? All right. At least, and then your homeschool is like, oh, I could get out of doing some school, a little less school, a little more music. That's all right.
Yeah, that's a pretty worthy trade-off for sure.
Yeah. So that's what happened.
When it came to, I suppose, I guess like the turning pro stage, which was, selling the house, going, living in the van, or living in the motorhome and traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So you were still at the stage then, I guess, where there was a bit of that, I don't know if you'd call it child novelty, where it's, I imagine,
yep,
people are picking up on you, and it's like, oh my God, kind of my reaction of like, oh my God, it's like the Dukes of Hazzard. it's they live in this completely different world to me. And I imagine there was portions of that. And then I guess you had this stage where you were doing the more kind of, I guess, I don't want to say riding on the coattails of child novelty, but there's that aspect to it. And then I guess when you're getting older, it's now like, okay, now you're the the adult band, and sure, there's still like the family band sort of vibe to it, but you can find a lot of them still hanging around, and I don't know, people just like kids more than adults when it comes to when it comes to certain things. Were there any like big differences that you noticed over the years, or?
Yeah, I remember at one point thinking after we had, so I would have been in my 20s, and Ben and Eddie they're almost to their 20s. Um, there was something we used to always do when we were kids was like say their name and their age, and at some point I was like, stop saying my age.
Yeah,
I was like, wait.
Yep.
At one point I was like, wait a minute, that's not impressive anymore. Like I'm like 22 years old. I better be like okay at something, like pretty. But I even remember I have a live episode of us playing at Sloppy Joe's in like 2016 or 2017 in Key West, and I was listening to it some of it the other day, and Ben was like giving everyone's ages. It was like Eddie on the mandolin, and he's 7 or 19 years old or something. I'm like, yeah, we don't need to be. It's just, but it was funny because we were so used to doing that because we were like, at one point, Ed was 11 or 12 years old, and at one point, even my brother Ben, he's been going on stage with us since he was like 5 or 6 years old. Like we were playing in bluegrass band and just starting to like get asked to play shows, and then he'd come up and my dad would bribe him with $1 to sing a song, and so he grew up on the stage like that. And I will say though, we got to keep some of that child novelty thing because I started having a family very young, and my kids are extremely musical as well. So I would have, when my kids would come to our shows, we'd get my son Jacob to when he was like 2 or 3 years old to come on stage, and he was already singing, and he was on stage just completely copying like everything we were doing, like rocking out and getting into it, even with the toy guitar and everything. He would take his toy guitar, put it behind his head, and pretend he was playing it behind his head, all this stuff. So we just pulled him up there for a song or two, like every set, and the crowd would eat it up because, like you said, like people just love to see the kids on stage, and so we got to take some of that with us as we got older. But we were also all as individuals, and me, Eddie, and Ben especially, and probably Kurt, we were all like, we want to be like a real band, not just like this cute family band, because we're not really as cute anymore. We're not cute little kids, and we realized that, and that's kind of what took us to Nashville. Was like, we can keep playing. We had this family show figured out in Key West where we'd play different genres of music, from bluegrass, classic rock, alternative rock, pop, blues. Anyway, we just play all sorts of different music in this variety show. We'd go to all these venues that we played regularly, like weekly, and we had like our set, and different people pretty much all year. And then we were there long enough that when those people would come back for like their yearly vacation, be like, oh yeah, we want to see the Doerfels. We started making friends and recognizing people. Like it was a really cool way to grow. But at the same time, as we were getting near the end of that, we're like, well, we can keep playing in bars, keep playing other people's songs, because we were just playing almost all covers. We'd throw out a few of our originals, but we didn't get to focus on them like hardcore. They were just like we tried to write, but they weren't, because of how many shows we played to make a living for all of us. We played probably 250 shows a year for years. And so we didn't have the time and energy you have to put into making your own music and be a band. We always like buy food and have a place to live, or try to be an artist. Like, yeah, we want to live.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Nashville did end up going in that way, where it was like the band went into a lot of debt trying to focus in on just writing and creating our own sound or music. And eventually that kind of pittered out, because we were all like, all right, we all need to survive bad now. Like,
Sure.
Getting ahead of myself a little bit, but hopefully that answered something.
No, that's kind of where I wanted to go next, which was, I guess, what the pressure of trying to make it, and maybe if you could even just determine or describe what making it would have resulted in, or what you imagined being like a full-time musician would kind of look like when you were going through that period.
Yeah, so I think when we decided to go to Nashville, the idea of making it was to get shows to play mostly our original music and be able to make enough money to live doing that.
Yeah.
Whether that meant being like famous or just finding a niche,
where
finding a circuit. Yeah, finding like a circuit where it's like you have a good crowd, but it's, you're not playing at stadiums. Like, that's okay with us. So the goal wasn't like, I want to play at the Super Bowl. That wasn't the goal.
Yeah.
The goal was just like play music we loved and all of us be able to like have a home, have a family, and so, kind of do the things that you do as you grow up. And I think that because of all of our differences, I had to step out early because family got ahead of me, and it's not like a bad thing. I don't regret it, but that's just what happened. Like, I had my children and they were getting older, and I had 4 kids when we came to Nashville in 2017. My youngest was 1 year old. And so I think near the end of 2017, when we were working and writing in Nashville, I realized I looked at the next like 6 months of our work and our shows, and it was like very little. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to survive. And so I had to kind of gracefully like, I'm there for you guys in the back end, but I can't play the shows. I had to just go get a 9-to-5 job kind of thing, And
Yeah,
so
for
that's
sure.
what happened for me. But no one else had kids yet, except for my sister, who was already out of the band by that point. She married in the Keys, and she's still there with my parents, married to a great guy there. And so a little bit of my family's still in Florida, or I shouldn't say a little bit, like a bunch, but because my family's so big. But yeah, so the band's in Nashville. We're writing, we're trying to meet people, trying to, make connections. In Nashville is a lot about connections, and it's just the game of music.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah, and the hard part was, I don't think we're like, we're not. It's not that we're not social and we don't want to be personal with people or personable with people, but when we have to do it, and we're like, we have to try to be friends with these people so that they can scratch our back, we scratch theirs. It was not. There's something we just did not. We like fought it, and so we had a manager at the time who was really cool, and it was helped us out a lot. And he's one of the reasons that brought us to Nashville. We signed with like a management contract, I guess you'd call it, but it was just like a manager guy who had a bunch of connections, and we did our research. He had some. I'm trying to think of the acts he had that he managed. I'd have to get my brothers; they could tell me because they worked with him a lot longer than me. But like, he was pretty legit, and so, but he wanted us to do all these things, like, you need to get on TikTok, start doing all this stuff, and we were like, we just want to make music, like songs, and have an album. Like, we didn't want to evolve the new way that it was evolving, and like, we grew up when we were kids selling bluegrass CDs. Like, we'd make bluegrass CDs. We'd go into the studio, play 12, or our friend's basement was the studio at this time. The Fondas. So the Fondas' parents, Ralph and Tamla. Ralph had a studio where he had all his computers set up. We go into the basement. We play 12 songs, an album, and we did that once a year while we were playing bluegrass. I mean, we don't. And so we would go to shows and sell those, and we made a good amount of money from those CDs. When all the CDs and all that stuff started happening, and we were all going to Nashville, and we were a real band, and like, no one bought CDs anymore. Like, there was just, then we were like trying to play original music, but we're nobody. So we couldn't really sell tickets for shows and we didn't have a bunch of money to pump into ourselves for promotion. That was another thing. We're like, struggling to survive, playing at bars, just, playing for tips and all this kind of thing to make money. And we did really well. Like, everyone always loved our band, but it was just, there was some kind of like, we never got over the hump of like anything, like any steam picking up and like, oh, we're starting to trend or something, like to have a name for ourselves or something. And so I don't know, looking back, because of us not wanting to change with some of the music stuff, like get on the TikTok, which I don't think we ever did. I mean, I think we maybe did at the very end, but it wasn't like, we didn't figure out like how all the people who are doing it and succeeding, we didn't figure out like, oh, we got to put out all this content, all this stuff. That was another problem, putting out content. That was another problem, because we'd want to find like the perfect song. And so there'd be 20 songs later, you didn't release a song because you didn't think any of them were the perfect song. And so that's why we actually, right now with Life Value, have this bank of music that we're able to like go through and choose and tweak and release, because it's like, you know what? None of the songs are perfect. It's because we're humans, and no humans are perfect. So how are you going to find a perfect? What's perfect? Radio hits? I guess that's perfect. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So there was just some confusion, we weren't in unity with all those things, and the same with, we weren't in unity with our manager either. So it's like, since we weren't working in unity at all those things that we need to do to like be in the mainstream music business, it kind of just dwindled out, I think, and everyone got burnt out too. Some of Ben and Ed were trying really hard, and to the point where it wasn't. We all could tell it wasn't fun for them. And when music's not fun, that translates on stage when you're performing. And who wants to go watch a performer who doesn't want to be there? You know.
I got the impression just from listening to you guys and your podcast was you did try and make it. It's not like you failed through lack of effort. It's all those other things that surround it. A large portion of it can be luck. A large portion of it can just be wrong place, wrong time. Your style is going out of fashion, or the things that you really enjoy, just personal preferences, that sort of thing. But I've had some similar experiences just with I like to try things in my life, just do random weird stuff. So there was a little phase where I was just trying out some like promotional acting sort of stuff. So it'd be the kind of people like giving free samples out in a shopping center, or helping to organize a kids game outside of a sporting event, that sort of thing. And then some like extras, acting work, extra, that sort of stuff. Just testing it out. And I had some real moments just in all of these different things where I would meet someone who was trying to be a proper actor, or inspire. What would you call it? Like the up and coming, like really trying to make it, trying to find their breakout film or role or something like that. And I saw how much effort they'd have to put into all of these other things, the connections, the scratching this person's back and this, which you can't get away from. It's a very rare person who can just do that one thing that they love to the utmost, there are practical considerations you have to have in life. But I think when the balance shifts from maybe 80% of doing the thing you love to 20% of all the TikToks and the promotions and that stuff, and when it gets to be more 20% of the thing you love and 80%, that's when it's just, you just go, well, I don't want this thing anymore. So did you have any like real moments of standout moments of just the I don't know what you call it, the inanity of trying to be a professional musician, and then it's like, oh wait, I have to go meet this guy to just have brunch with him or something? Were there any moments that you had where it was just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, like you'd be like, okay, we're going to go on this radio show to promote this thing, and it's like, but you kind of realize like it didn't, like, then you go either promote a show or something, you go to the show and the show is kind of not that great, and you're like, so we did all this stuff to try to do this cool thing, and for what? Like, we got paid barely nothing. Almost no one comes to the show. It was this. There were moments where it was like, what are we doing? Like, we work so, especially all the travel you have to put into these things. So it's a lot of the traveling. You make a run of shows somewhere. You try to maybe do some promo for them, and then maybe you do like 7 shows and like 2 of them are really cool, but the rest are kind of like, ugh. And so it kind of leaves you in like off balance. You're like, well, those 2 were actually pretty good, but the rest of it killed us. You're driving all night. You're shower. You're getting a shower in the hotel once in a while. It's just like you're just kind of like grimy, and that whole lifestyle was like it was like what's how much of this are we going to take before we just say, yeah, maybe it's not going to work out. Like, which was for me, it didn't end like that for me, because if I just backed out from purely to make money for my family, I still felt like the guys were it was Ben, Ed, Joe, and Kurt. I was like, they're still like, they're incredibly talented, and I still thought like they're going to do something. But then when you when they started puttering out too, it was kind of like, well, why don't you guys get part-time jobs and then just try to do a couple of shows a month? Because that was what the problem was. It wasn't that people weren't enjoying them or whatever. It's just they were going into so much debt, because you make content. You know how much time you put into making your content. The after parts of this episode, when you're making music, like I've made some jingles and a few little songs. I put typically, I don't know if you've heard any of my little spoofs that have been on No Agenda or any of those.
Couple of them
but
here and there, yeah.
but I've typically put no less than 12 hours into each single one of those.
Yeah.
And they're just for like, as a joke, and they're not even that good. They're just like funny, you know? Like, so when you're putting the real music, I mean, they're probably putting, 20 hours into a single song. And then when you get the payback for that is like, oh yeah, it sounds pretty good. But, and then no one ever listens to it, doesn't get any traction anywhere. And it's just like, you get maybe 1,000 streams after a year or something. And, and it feels like you're begging. Oh, it feels like you're begging. I think that's another weird part too. You're begging for people on Facebook or whatever. Hey, listen to our track. If you like it, share it. Like, it's just like, and everyone's doing that it's like, I'm just another annoying, like, thing to try to shove into someone's face and be like, hey, support us too, like us, all this. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like genuine or something, even though it's like, it's kind of what you got to do. But we weren't good at that. We were never good at selling ourselves. Like we were never in a good way. You know how like you got something to sell, like you have Mere Mortals and you want to pitch them like, hey, it's a pretty cool podcast if you're into these things. Well, we weren't good at saying, hey, we do this kind of music, and if you really like it, you might like it. Like, check us out. We're pretty good. We weren't good at doing that for ourselves. We just want, so it was like hard to, and I don't know if it's like, oh, we wanted to be humble or something, but it just we weren't good at pitching and standing up for like what we were making. It was kind of like, well, if you like what you hear, then like it. Why do we have to tell you to do anything? Like, if you like it, listen to it, share it. And I don't know, that's sort of where how all the feelings of that, what you're saying, went. It was all like,
I totally get you. It's a really weird balance mix you got to find. And sometimes it is just, you got to just acknowledge, I don't want to do this thing. There's so much stuff I don't do, the Facebook posts, the automating stuff. There's so much of it where it's just, I don't enjoy that process of really trying to find the algorithm, for example. That's the one nowadays, trying to find the algorithm on YouTube or on Facebook, Instagram, and it's always changing. So you can never just win at it. You can slightly win in it, and then the goalposts change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is that thing of being not able to be genuine. So if you aren't naturally really outgoing or extroverted, that's not me. I'm very much introverted.
And I was just gonna say, I think that's what leads us to value for value. Is it's not as pushy as, it doesn't feel as pushy as all those other things. The Facebook and the Twitter and everything. It's like you can truly sit there, present what you have, what you think you're presenting that's valuable, and then say, hey, if you find any value, if you find this valuable, just let us know in time, talent, or treasure. And to me, that's so much easier for our band, because it's like, well, if anyone out there is listening to it and they're, in this value for value world that the people listening are kind of understanding that, like, because if it's not out, like, they might check it out for a little bit. And if you're not really doing anything, well, they're just not going to listen anymore. But then you get a few people who do like you, and you're like, well, there's a few people out there. It's like, oh, it's not crickets. Oh, you got a couple streams, don't know who they are. It's like, no, like, we got a few boostergrams this week. Wow, cool. Let's make a little podcast and thank those people. Let's make some interaction. And I think that's kind of what's starting to re-energize all of us, all the guys and me, is like, there's a few real people out there that's like, hey, these guys are pretty good. I wonder what happened and why they never went anywhere. Well, it doesn't matter. Like, we're finding their music now. Like, cool.
Perfect segue. That was really what I wanted to get onto next. And I've got some of my own ideas about the framing of the V4V and why it has that completely different feel to, like you were saying, the begging of like, please just check out this, where it's it feels like you're doing it for their attention rather than for what actually the value that you can give to them, sort of thing. But I suppose just like backstory for that was you found No Agenda, and I don't know what was your initial impression when you heard the value for value segments in No Agenda, and
I kind of was,
how that was. Yeah,
I remember thinking like, oh, that's really cool, and I'm like, is it real, for real? Like, seriously, they're just putting out there and they don't make anything anywhere else? Like, I was at first I was like, I was already pretty skeptical of like everything. I don't know, I've been pretty skeptical of just anything I hear on any
In the
media,
internet.
any side. Yeah, just any. Yeah. So I'm always like, I'm always about asking more questions. Like the experts, who's the expert? I want to know the name. I want to know where they worked. I want to know, like, I've just always thought that way, and a lot more so since probably 2019, 2020, all that. But that's when I started. My cousin Mike, he started telling me, hey, you should check out this podcast, No Agenda. And so I remember listening to it like once. I was like, oh, it's fun. It was kind of interesting, kind of cool, but it was like so long. And then they had this like, and there's like two guys chatting and whatever. And I thought it was neat, but I don't think I listened to it regularly. And then, but I listened to it once in a while, and it's like, oh, it's kind of cool. And then 2020 did happen, and they started trying to shut everything down. And I remember listening to it for whatever reason, and they were explaining exactly what I was thinking was happening, because I was already kind of like, okay, we're gonna shut down the whole world. What? Like what? And I remember it just. I just when I found that, and then they started explaining what they've been seeing from all over the world in the media from all over the place, and that's really when I got hooked and started listening to donation segments. It was like, no, this is legit. Like these guys really. Okay, Adam Curry, yeah, he has some history like in mainstream in the '80s and then doing tech work, but I was like, he has some of his other podcasts he does, and but this is what he does. Like, and anyone, this is what I think is amazing. And I have an issue with some people. It sounds like they're wanting value for. This might be a little off topic, but they're wanting value for value music, which is this new thing. They're thinking like this is going to be the mainstream someday. This is going to be the thing, and I'm like, that will defeat the purpose of what value for value is in a way. I'm not so sure if that's what we want. We want like no mainstream music and just value for value music. I'm like, I don't know if that makes sense because I heard someone say, when value for value is the main thing, and like, you can't just reach out to Ainsley Costello or whoever it is. You can't just reach out to them because they're going to be so popular. It's like, well, it's like you can reach out to Adam Curry,
yeah,
and he'll reply to you if you're a nobody, and because it's value for value. He's not like the untouchable, manager running stuff or celebrity. Like he is a celebrity to us in a way, but he's also a real person, and somehow they've managed to do that and make a living. That's what I think value for value, like music or anything that's value for value, whether it's your podcast. I don't think we want it to be pure mainstream, do we? I don't know. That's an interesting.
I think there's a lot of limitations to it becoming mainstream. Mainstream supposes that everyone does it, whereas on No Agenda they say it's about 4% of people who will donate monetarily. Obviously, a lot of people provide other stuff out of that, but then even then, it would maybe be 30% of people who would take any sort of action. And this is just normal because there's so many things that I used to watch PewDiePie, for example, back in the day, and every YouTuber's like, hit the like bell, subscribe, or whatever. I never did, never a single time. It's just like, I don't want to do that. And all it would have required was like literally a click of the mouse button, much easier than a lot of the stuff that we're asking our audiences to do. So I think it'll eventually kind of get maybe bastardized into something like, I could imagine a Spotify type equivalent where you sign up for the premium, and perhaps in the background they've got all of these things working where if you listen to a lot of indie bands and then one Taylor Swift song, instead of most of your money going to Taylor Swift, it goes to the people who you're actually listening to. So it's like kind of value for value, or at least it's a more fair distribution. I think that's will happen. That value for value? Kind of, but not really.
Yeah.
So I think like the pure spirit of it won't like it's just too hard for a lot of people.
Well, think about it this way: is value for value an industry?
No.
So like how there's the mainstream music industry, like that's what they call it. Like it's an industry. What is an industry? What does an industry do? Isn't it like a bunch of like this industry, like the video game industry, a bunch of companies making this thing, mass duplicating them and selling them like to make a lot of money. So when I hear people like, oh, value for value, like music or podcast or anything, the next it's going to be the industry. It's like that's not what value for value is really. So how can it's going to be? It's weird.
It's a very individual thing. I think that's kind of what it gets down to.
And I think when people understand that, and it's like, well, this is real. Like when I understand that, and I send a boostagram to Mere Mortals or to Curry and the Keeper or whatever, and like they read it, it's like when people kind of click that these people are really just being individual and responding to individuals. I mean, I don't know if the mass population is going to do that. I don't think they will ever. Like, I think it's just going to be probably like 33% or some crazy number like that.
Exactly. That being said, I think...
Sorry to take if I took you off track.
No. It's totally where I wanted to go. I suppose just comparing the two of your experience with trying to make it in the music industry and then comparing it to value for value music. And for those who don't know, it's essentially TJ will, along with the Doerfels, put their music up in an RSS feed as a podcast, but it's music instead. And so this still has the same basic concept of what's happening now with my podcast when, I ask people, if you're enjoying this, donate in, send a message. I'm going to include TJ as a split in this as well. So, part of it goes to him. And then it's essentially the same thing, but with music, and it's kind of getting promoted now with music shows like Boostergram Ball and It's a Mood. There's quite a few of them out there. Somewhat like a radio show, if I had to describe it. But
you got a person who's a DJ or acts like a DJ, even if they've never been a DJ before, where they pick out whatever songs they want that's in the music that's in that value for value model, and they play it. And that's something I've been wondering if there needs to be like a guideline for someone who wants to make a music show. Should there be like guidelines, like in general? Like the DJ gives 90% to the artist and takes no more than 10. Like there's no rules like right now. Like a DJ could put stuff out there, but make it 50-50 or make it lopsided where they get more. Like someone technically could do that, but then it's like, hopefully there aren't people out there like getting into this where they're like, well, I want to take advantage of everybody. And I think they'll be figured out pretty soon because the nature of RSS is open, right? So if all someone would have to do is look at the RSS feed and be like, hey, that guy's actually not splitting it fair with the artist at all. Like, and then if we get the word out for people who understand that, hopefully they just wouldn't do well.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest notes that I've had on learning about all of this, which is so much of it is just about being open, honest with your communication and what's actually happening, and then people being able to verify that as well. So one of the things that a little story here was I was watching Billy Corgan, so the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, on Joe Rogan, and this must have been, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, maybe even more. And he had this story about one of the reasons they kind of split up as a band, or why they were having a lot of troubles, was he was the main songwriter, and just when it came to the royalty distributions and things like this, he kind of in a way like fairly said, look, I'm doing more work than you guys in terms of like I'm really writing all of this music. I've got like whether it be a special talent, whether he was doing more work for it or whatever it was, he was saying I deserve to be paid a bit more. And so in terms of the splits that they had of royalties, he got more, which ended up, when they became very successful, being a lot of money, like
a big deal,
ridiculous amount of money. And this started causing like a lot of strife in between the band members of, you're getting this much, he's getting this much, we're all out here performing, what's going on? And he was saying himself, like, that was one of the biggest things biggest mistakes he's made, was if he could go back, he would have made it just, flat equal distribution between all the band members. And that would have saved a lot of issues, whether it would have, like we were saying, the travel band lifestyle is very stressful, so things could have happened anyway. But I think that was perhaps the real gem, because if value for value music starts getting more popular and you start seeing, I don't know, mid-tier bands who the type of bands who are like, touring, or they're their the front acts or something like that for the real big ones, perhaps you're still going to have the same problems of if someone's getting paid more than someone else, or someone gets a hold of the RSS feed and perhaps you need a manager to manage that, or like the ex-boyfriend in the band gets it and then runs away with the music. You're still going to have all of these problems. It's just now when it's out in the open, we can all see it. So you don't have to do those backhand like, we'll promote you secretly on this show if you talk about this other, help promote this other band, all that sort of thing. And that's what I just think about value for value. It's like out in the open. Here it is. You can see everything.
It seems to be the most open way for us to put out content and for everybody to really see what's happening with if you donate, or it seems to be the most open way on the internet, right? Because we're talking internet, right? This is value for value is ultimately through the internet, and it's ultimately through Bitcoin, which I'm still learning about. I'm not even that. I don't know that much about Bitcoin, but
yeah, I always put it this way: the protocol itself allows for any transfer of any money, cryptocurrency, any value, to be honest. So if there was like, I don't know, Apple came out with an Apple Berry thing that was only traded within their Apple devices, and it was just a token of some sort, that the protocol allows for that to happen.
Yeah, and I guess technically it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. I mean, you can put a PayPal up or a Venmo Cash App code, and it could be anything.
Yeah,
as far as that kind of value.
Exactly. The big difference is, value is something that it's a weird one, because you can have, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and that certainly is true. You just have to go out on like one of the rubbish collection days where you'll find like a full mattress or a couch or something which has maybe a stain on it, but it's beautiful because for
one person, it, $5 could be a lot of money, whereas another person, but they're like, oh, I want it. That's a lot for me, but I really loved it. I want to give something. And someone else, like $50, or and we look in the agenda, it goes up from there. That's just examples, but it's not. Again, it's beautiful because we don't know everyone's individual, financial world, and we know that many of us are just kind of regular people, just kind of struggling to get by in a sense, so it's like we can't afford to but when a lot of us give a little bit here and there, or even sort of what is a lot to us for something that we really believe in and find valuable, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And that's what Adam Curry and our other podcasters that are doing value for value, who are, finding people giving back in that way. It's like very meaningful, because I know that even if somebody sends me a little bit, that's probably a lot of it for them, if they really felt implied enough to send anything. That, I mean, it's pretty moving, so it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's tremendous power. So there's that aspect to it, and then I suppose this is where the Bitcoin bit comes in, which is I could have someone in Africa or in India send me, $5 worth of Indian rupees, and let's just say they sent it via mail, and so I get, a $5 Indian rupee note, or what is the equivalent of that here. Whilst that might be valuable to them, what am I going to do with a rupee note here? I could exchange it, but the exchange is going to take basically all of it, because it's a rupee note, and what are they going to do with it? So there's just where having Bitcoin is like that unifying kind of force, where everyone can kind of agree, like, okay, this thing has value. And so sending it back and forth over the internet and the digital programmable money is allows for a lot of cool things, like the splits, and like being able to reference other people's work within your own, and collaborate in different ways. And I want to chat with you more about that right at the end. But yeah, I think that all of those sorts of things all combine together to create that distinct vibe where it's fun, it's open. Even though the words can seem very similar in terms of like check out my music and share and stuff, it doesn't have that begging feel to it. It's really hard to explain. It's probably one of the hardest ones I've found with it. and it's not just like you're not just getting it for free, because you are providing value. It's not like you've found a loop in the system and you're just like being able to extract money from somewhere, being a freeloader. No, like you're creating something of value, and then you're getting that back. When you've had, so you were talking about the Fondas before, so Ryan Fonda, for example. When you were first explaining and finding out value for value and value for value music, and realizing like, oh, I can put my music up as an RSS feed, and people can stream me money, and I'm going to get a lot more than I would through Spotify. What are their initial impressions when you're trying to explain it to them? Do they kind of get it, or are they just seeing it through like a monetary lens, or what's the kind of general impression you've had?
The general impression is it's kind of confusing, but like, while you've been talking, you told me about it a few times, maybe I'll try it. You know what I mean? Like what is this? Send them some links to Ellen Beats and whatever, and like, like the player is still, it doesn't have. I can't sync it across my devices.
It's really
it's
rudimentary. Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm like, it's literally in development right now. I can message the guy that's making this. It's brand new. But the idea is that here, if you put your song on here, when I'm listening to your song, Castaway, which I love so much, or some of his other songs, I can send him some Satoshis, which, is the way that I would send it to him. And so when he sees like me, which that's one of my favorite songs that he has, is Castaway. And once he started seeing that, because he's like, oh, I'll put some songs up. And he started seeing that. Then he starts to understand, which is, I didn't think of that when I first got our music going on podcasts. I was originally wanting to share with people, my family and my friends. And I wanted it to be free and easy. And when I looked into getting, like, I was like, I'll put all Doerfel stuff on Spotify and just whatever. But when I looked into doing that, it's like I have to sign up for this, all this. And then it's like, it just wasn't like, I just want to share it easily. I don't want to have to go through all these things and, I'm going to be an artist and we're going to try to get in streams and try to get in playlists. So like, no, I just literally want to share it word of mouth, or friends, family. Yeah. And I thought like podcasting would be a great way to do that. I'll just put it as a song, as an episode. And then to come and find out, Abel and the Wolf had already done that. And so I started finding like, oh, there's a few people who are already been thinking this exact idea that I had. And so then when Value for Value Music happened, and I show Ryan Fonda about it and show a few other people about it, they weren't thinking like me at all as far as that. They weren't trying to share, like they were just putting their music everywhere where people listen to music. Spotify, Apple, like, just make some songs, in my spare time, and I love doing it. They aren't even expecting to make anything on Spotify or Apple or anything. Like, they're not expecting to. So I'm like, well, why not put it here? And then if there's some people who are learning about Value for Value, really like it, they'll probably send you a little bit, which is more than you'll get on Spotify. And so they're like, yeah, I'll try it. And so now they're, I was just talking to Ryan, I think it was like a week ago. And he was like, yeah, I think I'm going to try to get my sister and maybe his parents make music too. And I'm like, yeah, if you need any help, let me know. But, you should definitely consider that, because he's seeing it's such a cool reaction. Not only are people being able to comment on a song, whatever, they're usually sending a boostagram with it, with or a number behind that, whether a meaningful number to that person that sends it, which is cool.
Whether it's big,
whether it's a lot or not,
somewhat arbitrary at this stage.
So, but it was not like a big like, hey, let me tell you about it, and it was like, whoa, I've got to do that. It was more like, what the heck are you talking about? It was almost like, I don't know, man, you sound crazy. It was almost kind of like that reaction.
Yeah, and which I think is kind of the normal thing, because it's I describe Value for Value like this. It's incredibly simple. Like the premise of it is it's like the most simplest thing ever. It's like, I provide value and you just provide it back if you want to. Mm-hmm. But the nuances and the complexities, that's why I've got a whole podcast related to like diving into those, is it really needs like just a transformation of kind of how you view and see things in many different ways. But I think like the best way of coming at it is with a big problem. It sounded like your problem was, not money related or anything. It was just, I want to share my music with people, and you'd think, put it on Spotify, it's super easy. It's like, no, it's not. I've got to a guy I connected here in Australia, a bit further north up in Airlie Beach, and he and his girlfriend have been making music, playing, and they were just starting like to kind of get, look at record deals and things like this, and he put like, he was like really happy, like, like we finally got on Spotify. They got one of their songs on there, and she had a pretty unique name, and I typed it in exactly as I thought it would be, and it was like it came up on there, but even then trying to find it and click it, it took me to some other place. I'm like, wow, this is actually not, it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
If you're not in, this is where it goes back to the mainstream, you're not going to come right up and be like, oh yeah, super clear and easy. It's more like you're buried behind all the people who have the labels, or are the labels, or or have the deals with the labels. And I'm not saying that, people who are, just regular people like me, and you can't ever do that. It's just, it's like probably like trying to go pro in sports, where it's like, you can be really good. You can be really, really freaking good. And the chances are still really, really bad to do it.
Yeah.
Since there's just so many people that are really good. And so if you're trying to get that spotlight, it just doesn't happen to most of us. It's just the number.
Yeah,
It's just the numbers, I guess.
Yeah, and
that's
you
why I like
really
organic, right? We're making friends. We're making real people, one person at a time, and that's what's happened to me ever since getting involved, and really involved with once I'd been a No Agenda fan, and then I started finding there was this whole other thing, No Agenda stream. Like, what's that? Then I find there's like all these other live shows, all the other people doing the value thing. I'm like, some of them are pretty wacky. Some of them are like, they're just all these different varieties, and I can literally just be a part of any of those I thought this guy was funny, I enjoyed that. Like, who am I? Wow, I can be a part of any of them. Anyone can be a part of our shows if they want.
Exactly.
They just got to take the extra step to, well, how do I do this value for value thing? Well, it's not hard. Just takes a few extra minutes of something that we're not used to, because it's not how we're used to everything working.
Correct. And the funny thing is, you don't realize how, if you're coming at it completely fresh, someone from like an alien from another planet, they come to Earth and they've got some music they want to share, and it's like, all right, you can either try putting it on the Spotify and all these distribution platforms and things like this, or do it through like an RSS feed, through something like Podhome now, or RSS Blue. It's actually, I would say, look, I don't know, I haven't tried to put any music up online, but I would hazard that it's not that much harder now to do it. But it's just we're so used to the big names and the standard, like the button looks like this to click this thing here and upload this here, where it's the gap between them is really shrinking. And I can definitely see this with the Bitcoin stuff as well, because back in like early 2021, when I was wanting to donate into like podcasting 2.0, it was hard, man. It was really, really hard. And yet the other day I was just doing some stuff on a couple of different wallets, and I was like, oh man, like this is so simple compared to what it used to be. Still slightly difficult. I could still understand people having some problems with it, but
I remember getting annoyed.
Complexity goes away.
I remember when I don't think I've even had a wallet for more than a year yet, Get Alby, but I was like, okay, I got to Get Alby. Where do I get the Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know what to do. Yeah. I was like, and then I finally figured out, Cash App. So I got in Cash App. It's like, okay, I just sent it to Sir TJ The Wrathful, Get Alby. Nope. No, you got to find some massive number somewhere. Like, but it wasn't hard. It was just a learning process. And it really wasn't hard. It was just, for whatever reason, and I think this is most people, you're just at the end of the day, and if you're not like just super easy for you, you're like, it's just another, it's like paying a bill almost, like, it's just something I gotta go out of my way to do. But once I did it, I was so glad I did, and I understand it now, because I spent 15 minutes figuring out the Cash App to get Alby.
Yeah, and it's just different, Example,
and
we don't
different
have
how you
Cash
do
App
it
here
too.
in Australia.
Oh, okay,
yeah. So we have to do another different way, or there's other ways that I recommend people to try it out. If they were doing it for us, I've even got like a little there's a service called LightSats where you can create some wallets for people, and they can kind of claim claim these Satoshis that are just sitting in there. So I created a whole bunch of them.
I heard about
just like
that.
2000.
Very cool.
And yeah, it's got like an onboarding experience. It'll all get there. It'll all get there. It's just tech in time.
That's awesome.
It's really fun to see that. Just with the what do you think? I suppose are like common frustrations you've seen just with other musician friends. Do they get that same feeling of it's like I don't want to do the promotions, like that's like, or like the begging sort of aspect? Because when I'm trying to think of like the music industry and what seems to be wrong with it, it doesn't seem to be necessarily that it's like a bunch of crooks at the top stealing all the money and being unfair. I get the feeling it's more just like a system has been created with a lot of bureaucracy, just like governments, and it's just like a grind where you end up getting into a state where you're like, this makes no sense. What am I doing here?
Let me think. So the question was, clarify the question.
What are like some common frustrations, I guess, you would see with other musicians?
With the mainstream or with value for value?
No, with the mainstream music industry.
Okay.
And like what's the biggest problem, I guess, you would hazard that people are having?
Well, you have to pay to get your music on Spotify. You have to pay to listen to, if you want to listen to any song on demand without commercials, you have to pay. And then if you don't get consistently like 100,000 streams a day, you're literally just paying. You're giving them your art and you're paying them, and you get nothing in return. I didn't
realize you had to pay them as well. Yeah, that's messed up.
So you
it's crazy.
Like, you have to use a distributor person, or there's websites to do it. I'm trying to remember the names of the websites. It doesn't matter.
Like
there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them.
DistroKid.
Yeah, I think stuff like that. So you pay them, they put the music up, and then for a listener, which I used to pay for Spotify a couple years ago. I actually met him a year ago, but because it was so nice not to have to get everything off my computer onto an MP3 player. Just I could pull almost everything. Their library was great, and it was always getting better. But the next thing I realized, especially from being a musician, was just eventually I was like, I purposely went in and canceled it because I was tired of I'm paying to be able to pull up someone's song and they get, unless it's like they're not getting anything. Even the very popular people that I maybe listen to, I'm trying to think who's really popular that I really like. John Mayer. I've always been a John Mayer fan. I'm not providing any value back to John Mayer by listening to him. Like, it doesn't matter. His numbers are so high and probably, like government, inflated and controlled by labels and however everything works. Maybe some of it's real. I'm sure some of it is real. I don't know, but I'm not giving any. John Mayer doesn't get any value from me listening to him. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
So I think the struggle, I guess, what I don't like about the mainstream is you pay to get on, people pay to listen, and the people who are putting their music out there who are actually pretty good. Like, I know the Doerfels are pretty good. I know there's a bunch of Ryan Fonda really good. Like, they're not getting anything back from being on those Apple or Spotify. Nothing. Amazon. They'd have to get, like I said, 100,000 streams a day, to see something to maybe like buy food or pay rent with. 100,000 streams a day. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
Ridiculously hard to get to that sort of level. And that's the thing. It's not a kind of tiered system where if you get 5 streams, you get, five divided by however many amount of streams. Yeah,
there's also like popularity now, right? If it's whoever's the more popular people get paid more per stream. If I recall reading, I don't remember who I was listening to reading right, but it's always changing to make more benefit the people who kind of own it all than the random guy who's like, hey, I practiced really hard and I'm going to put my music out there. Like, it's not going to benefit you, buddy.
The next season of Value for Value, I'm going to do a lot of. It's going to include. It's going to be mostly focused around what's changed with the kind of digital revolution over the last 20, 30 years. So a lot of it, I'll be taking like things from like this book here, Free by Chris Anderson, and he was the same guy who wrote The Long Tail, which was talking about how the digital ability to upload storage and bandwidth costs just go down to zero or near marginal zero cost, allowed Amazon, for example, to list all of these just ridiculous random products, which only 100 of them will sell, but you're still able to do that, and you can see how this happens with music, and even greater, faster fashion with digital products like music, podcasts, ebooks, all those sorts of things, digital art, and I'm really going to dive into, I suppose, how it's kind of made it more fair in some ways, more fair in most ways, but there's still just this aspect of popularity of just these old legacy systems trying to, there's the way things were done. This musician deserves this much, or they get this much because they, are the biggest talents, they're the biggest draw, that sort of thing. I think a lot of it's going to change. It's just going to take time. And this is where value for value, I think, is just almost like it's just a separate existing thing where you can get some of those problems solved. So my problem, for example, before I found out about value for value, was I was doing the podcast, been doing it for like a year and a half maybe. I'd gotten maybe, I don't know, 10,000. I think it was about 10,000 downloads in that first year across the various shows. And I didn't know if they were all bots. It could have easily just been all bots. I know a couple of people listened. I know, but it would be like family and friends, and the only way I could verify is because they would tell me about something I'd said or something like that.
What years was this?
So I started the podcast with Juan in late 2019, so September 2019. So this was like 2020, started 2021.
Because I don't know if it's the same in podcasting, but when our band, we changed our band name from the Doerfels to Fuel on Fire for a short time because no one can spell the Doerfels, but we decided to make people learn. But when we were Fuel on Fire, there was a time when we had a song that I think caught the algorithms. And you know how we did it though? We like basically paid for them. We paid Facebook, we paid trying to think all the other ones. Might have been in Twitter. We paid for all these ads so we'd show up more in everyone's feeds. And when we were doing that, so not only did we have to pay to put our music up there, then we had to pay for again for us to that ever since the timeline and ever since social media timelines were broken and then put in ads in, I've been way less interested. It's like it's not I'm getting stuff shoved in my face every other like post or whatever, so that a company or something is paying for, someone's paying for. It's not just who I follow. So I don't know, like you said, like but you weren't paying for those, right? That you're just putting your music out on, was it Buzzsprout or one of those? Or not music, sorry, your podcast.
Yeah. The podcasts were, I've switched hosts a bunch of times. It was originally on Whooshka, and then we moved to, we tried out another one that didn't really work. So
but to your credit, you weren't paying for extra, like, were you, did you have social stuff where you were trying to like, put your stuff on there more, or was it just?
We were using social media, but no, we never.
But did you
never
pay
really did like paid? I'm trying to think. I don't know. We never did. But you would get all these weird things happening where I'd sometimes go into the stats and I'd see almost every single episode that we'd release been like downloaded in just one day, and it's like, well, is that just a bot scraping, or is that someone who's gone to their podcast app and
so
just,
you're
like,
using
hit download.
A hosting company? Like, here's something this is somewhere where my mind goes, and I hope this isn't like bad. I don't know. Could a hosting company purposely do that to the regular podcaster to make them feel like, oh, someone's listening, I'm going to keep paying for the hosting and to keep putting out podcasts that you don't really know? Are you getting feedback? I mean, I'm guessing you obviously did get real feedback. I'm not trying to say don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to say your listens weren't real. I have no idea.
I'm still not sure.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, I wouldn't put it past a company. I hope they don't, but I wouldn't put it past a company to try to keep their, people paying them to make it feel like, we're getting listens, so we're going to keep doing this. Like,
I can give you a real example of one thing that's happened.
Okay.
Would it if they got caught? That'd be pretty bad.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty bad.
Yeah.
It'd be a very risky thing to do.
Would be.
There were some companies though where that they were more like the advertising company, right? So they would be like, we'll take your show and we'll put ads in it, and so that'd kind of be like, there'd be the advertisers, there'd be the podcast, and then there would be this kind of like middlemen, and the middlemen would be like, all right, well, we'll get your like ads, we'll put them in a podcast, and you can expect a certain amount of downloads per episode. These going to be like kind of like real people, and then that's how the advertising model works.
Yeah.
The people listen to it, a certain amount of them will buy the product or whatever it is, and then the money cycle flows like that.
Right.
And what this middlemen were then doing was they were getting these podcasts with ads in it and being put into games where people would be online games where how you'll play for like 10 minutes, or you'll go to a next level, and then before the next level pops up, an ad pops up on your screen. And this would essentially just be a podcast would pop up on their screen with an ad in it, and they'd listen for like 2 or 3 seconds and then hit the X button and then go on to the next level of their game. So all these advertisers who thought, oh, we're getting our money's worth from like real people listening to this real show, it wasn't. It was just a bunch of people who were playing like mobile games and then skipping it as soon as they could. So and they were making like tremendous markup. This middleman on doing this. So there's things like that. Every industry has their. I mean, I'm pretty I'm pretty ideological against advertising. I think it's really broken.
Oh yeah.
The just how it works with social media, just how it works on TV and digital content. I'm not a fan of it.
Well, it's to the point I don't understand. I think it's insane, some of it. Like the car commercials. Like how, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I've never bought a new car in my life. And I don't know. I'm a mail carrier. There's hundreds of thousands of mail carriers. I know how much money we make. We shouldn't be buying new cars. I mean, unless you're just completely on your own and you've been there 10 years, you have no other expenses. It's a lot. I mean, it doesn't make any like logical financial sense to me. Not that I don't want to buy a new car, but and I'm not saying, I'm not saying, and also I'm not saying anything against people who buy new cars. That's not the point. I'm just, it's just the advertisement, like every other advertisement, a car commercial. Like, are you selling that many cars by your new car commercial every single year? Like, can that be real? I don't know. It seems crazy to me.
Yeah. For me,
oh man,
what kind of makes sense to me is called satvertising. I've heard that name thrown out, but it's essentially just if you were trying to promote a song on Facebook or something, instead of your song, you giving them all the money and then Facebook showing the ad to like all these kind of unwitting people in a way, it's more if someone sees it, they get like a tiny little bit. So you can kind of see this with the fountain promotions, for example, where I've done this a couple of times where I'll promote the show on there, but a lot of the money that I'm giving for that promotion is just going directly to the people who are actually consuming it. So they're kind of getting paid to listen to my show, at least to try it out, to taste it. That kind of makes sense to me, but yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, it just gets into one of those things where it's all kind of behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. You don't know where that Facebook money goes. You don't know how are you going to verify that it's actually being seen by real people?
Yeah.
You can't, there's no openness, there's no transparency about that.
So you can still, whatever hosting company you use, you can still get some idea of some of your like streams or listens to, or is it just downloads?
We still get stats.
Because I will tell you one thing about the Doerfelverse is I only know who's listening by if you're streaming Satoshis or sending a boostergram. I don't keep. Maybe there's a way. I think there is a way. I think I've heard to sort of hook up to. I forget what it's called. OPM3.
OP3.
Yeah, OP3. Yeah. But I clicked on it once and it was like something's not working, and I have no idea if how many downloads or anything. But I just figure that if we get a few boostograms here and there, that I know when I listened to things, I listened for a long time before getting involved with boostograms or sending any kind of Satoshi. So I'm like, hey, if we're getting a few, then hopefully that means there's a bunch more, and
Yep.
they'll come around.
And that's exactly what solved my problem, which was, okay, are these things bots? I'm not too sure. And I would see every now and then, I'd go into, what was it? It was the like Apple Podcasts app or whatever it is. I don't own any Apple devices, so I'd have to get there through like iTunes, which I can kind of download onto Windows and then look there. And I'd see that someone might have left a review, and it was maybe from like 6 months ago. And it's like, oh, cool, someone actually listened and left a review. That was super cool. There's no way I could know about that, find that out. Mm-hmm. It's very hard, even in that ecosystem, where if someone sends it in the US, I won't necessarily see it. It's more, it has to be like in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
All these sorts of things. And then that's when I found out about, like boostergrams, and it just changed everything, where I was like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense.
Very cool.
It just, yeah. And once again, it wasn't the monetary amounts, although they have been large, and like I think we're getting to almost about 10 million across 10 million sats across the 3 different shows that I've had.
Yeah, awesome.
Which is like, that gives me encouragement of like, okay, I'm willing to give this a shot and try and make this a full-time gig. And the biggest thing is just being able to receive messages. It's just and know that they're real and genuine and not spam, because they have either a tiny bit or a lot of money attached to it. And it's like, oh my God, this solves everything.
Yeah. When someone decides to go through okay, I can be a part of this. All I have to do is figure this out. Okay. I don't really feel like, okay, finally I figured it out. But when they go through that, you're usually going to get some kind of response that has some kind of quality to it, because they actually had to do a little bit of, figuring out how to do it. And so, I can go into all our regular stuff, YouTube and whatever, and you just is saturated with the comments, and some a popular song, that artist is never going to read the comments. I mean, they might scroll through for a minute, but if there's like hundreds of thousands or thousands of comments, I mean, you're just, whereas in this, people have to go an extra step just to show like, hey, I really valued this. So, okay, I'm going to figure this out, because I want to tell you that I valued it, or whatever, or be a part, or I have something, or like a no agenda. I have information. I'm an expert in this one thing that you guys are talking about, and I really actually know. I want to tell you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of.
This is why I think value for value is probably more powerful for the smaller individuals, small to medium type, lone podcasters. Will it work for a company setup, for example?
I don't know.
Maybe. I'm not too sure. Yeah. Like, you guys are probably closest to that, because you've got a whole bunch of you doing it. But I definitely think that aspect is super critical. On Wavelake, for example, does Ryan get a message when someone sends in a boost? Like, is there an easy way for him to see those things?
He just started getting messages. He just be able to start. Yeah. So okay. I know he can get messages. And I don't think he sees the full amount. He just sees whatever they send him. So gotcha. I believe that's what, for someone like Wavelake, that's why I think Adam was mentioning people, hey, when you boost, say who you're boosting through and your full amount, and who, and who you're going to, so they can't like actually change anything.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate, because that's like the critical thing. When all of this was first starting up, and there was like 500 shows on who had value enabled, and I think I had 4 or 5 of them.
Nice.
I dominated it. I was 1% of all shows.
Yeah, let's go.
I was sending this out to like boostergrams, just out to all these new shows that were appearing on, but I wasn't getting that feedback loop, which is so critical to value for value, because they weren't noticing that I was sending them a message. And then it was that weird stage again where I was like, all right, do I individually message them on like Instagram or an email and say like, hey, I sent you some money and a message attached, by the way, just in case you didn't know. It's that weird learning stage where people have to kind of get used to it, but it's like when it clicks and you start seeing the message, the amount, the real-time nature of it, it all just like everything like clicks into place.
Are you in any of the telegrams for like value for value stuff? Do you guys have Telegram out there. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of
I guess the reason I'm saying is
like
there was
Ellen Beats and stuff like that.
Yeah. There was a question in there.
Yeah. I'm part of that.
There's a question the other day, and it was like, hey, if I'm on, self-hosting, how do I interact with people who are sending me boosts? And I was like, well, I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I was like, but the way the way that I made sense to me was to make a little podcast. So I was like,
which I wanted to ask, how's that going? How's that experience?
It's a huge learning
of
experience,
connection?
that's for sure. And I actually wanted to ask you if you had any, criticism or feedback, because I'm looking at our podcast and our episodes, how they've been going so far. We are about to have our 18th episode come out, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, we sort of have a format, but we get off track a lot. And on the ones we get off track a lot, they end up being really long. And I'm like, I want people who like our music to be able to tune into our podcast. It can, if they send a boostagram, be able to hear their boostagram and not feel like they have to search or like, okay, I'm just gonna like figure out where their boostagram might be read. I totally understand if they don't want to listen to, we're bringing a guest on and we're going to talk to him for an hour and whatever. Like, I understand that if they just like, hey, I just liked your song. I didn't really want, I don't, especially in a day where there's so many podcasts. Like I know you probably can't listen to all the podcasts you want to listen to. I know I can't. And also I kind of need a break. Like I want to listen to all these different podcasts, but sometimes I'm like, I'm podcasted out, not in a bad way. Like I want to hear them, but my brain's like overloaded, like gonna explode or something. So it's like, so it's like, I don't know. From right now, and this could change. This is all experiment and learning process for me, but I'm kind of thinking like, okay, I'm sensing we should focus on tidying up our episodes a little bit and making them not like this big no agenda or long thing where it's like we go on for hours, like 3 hours or something. And because I don't think we're gonna have, I mean, we might have some cool stories, but let's just put them in, keep the episodes short and spread out more episodes. Why try to keep someone riveted when they probably have a lot of other podcasts they listen to and they just were like, hey, I like your music,
I think you're already doing the main thing I'd suggest, which is just including chapters in.
I need to learn that. I mean, I know I can do it in sovereign feeds. I just haven't taken the time to do that.
I thought I remember seeing some chapters.
No, I don't think
a couple of
I don't think I've made any chapters. I can tell you I haven't.
Okay. I'll have to go back because I swear I remember seeing one or two. But in any case, that's one of the ones that I personally like really try and make good for mine, because I just find that so valuable, even just outside of just value for value and like YouTube. When YouTube has chapters, I much prefer it, and I think they've realized that themselves, because if people don't have chapters, YouTube now just creates automatic chapters.
And that would be perfect.
Which aren't as good.
That would be perfect for like the dilemma I'm saying. Like if someone doesn't have the time, but they sent in a boost for a song or something, they can see the chapter, boostergrams or whatever. And
yeah, exactly. And skip forward to that if they want, or vice versa. If they don't want to listen to that, they can skip it. I think that's
without seeing a whole hour and a half long or whatever, and be like, where should I try, or where should I look for?
It's funny with when it comes to the purism of some things of I want people to listen to the whole show. I'm very much of the opinion like, just if you listen to what you want, like if you really love the value for value section, like just go to there and listen to that. If you don't, well, here's chapter markers. You feel free to skip over. I'm totally cool with that.
Well, it's so like I can't be offended for someone listening and deciding to skip some when they don't have to listen at all. Like I can't be
exactly.
So like,
exactly. I don't know. Yeah, you guys were having a discussion once. So the only other thing is like I just know the experience of sending in a boostergram and expecting it to get read out or to be acknowledged, and it doesn't. Like it gets missed, all of this is super new. We're all guilty of skipping things. Nodes break down. Internet goes out. It all mishaps happen. But I've tried really hard to make it sure that I don't miss things. So I've got like 2 or 3 backups that I can check. If it feels like no one's boosted in this week, that's kind of weird. Or if a regular one comes in that doesn't come in, like I'll double check or triple check to make sure. So that's the only other thing I'd recommend.
That's up on my list. I actually, on the last episode, which I haven't released yet, I have to go back and put in myself the boostograms because we got so busy. We were pitching value for value to our friend who we had on the podcast, and then we played some music. And the next thing we know, it was like an hour and a half long, and like we ended it, and then it was like, oh. So I think Ed or someone was like, oh, we didn't do the boostograms. I'm like, what? That's like one of the main reasons. I can't believe we. So now I have to go put it in because it's like I understand from sending boostograms. I love that I know whoever I sent it to has read it because they're going to read it on the podcast. Like there's no avoiding it. If I think if people who if they thought, oh, I'll just reboost some boostograms like the ones I want to, if I want, I think that would lose, like people would stop like listening because it's just showing like, hey, you're going to at least read what I say and think about what I say, whether it's, just a thank you or a, hey, did you ever think of this? Or like your books, or you ever heard this book? Or like, they know you're going to see it, and that's really valuable. Makes that connection.
Yeah. I kind of look at a lot of this and just, look at, it's just a more digital version of kind of what they do on No Agenda, which is, they have to have limits. They've got so many messages come in,
and I think
you just cannot get to
and that
everything.
makes sense. So, if you got so busy, or if I got so busy, like with like our shows and our content, you would have to start doing that. And I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable what they're doing. So I think if like we ever got that busy, I don't find that unreasonable because you'd be reading. They would be reading a segment for like an hour or more, if they just read everything that people sent for like $1,
Yeah. So. The only other the reason I wanted to ask you about how the Doerfels is going was, Adam and John have this very tight feedback loop, and this is how it is done, and I think that's super great. I don't think every musician should start a podcast. Much like I know I'm sure there's musicians out there who are like, the thought of starting a podcast would be the equivalent of getting on TikTok, was for you guys. No. It's just like, I don't want to do that, and this is where I think it's just like, you just have to kind of get creative, think of different ways you could do it. Yeah. You could have an Instagram where you just shout out them on there.
Absolutely.
And so you like, I don't know, take a screenshot of everything that's come out, or perhaps you have a Facebook page where you say like, or make it just a blog post. I don't know, even a website. There's all sorts of different ways. You're totally right, because
we're definitely going to see people that need to figure out, because they truly want to thank people, but they're just like, yeah, we're not going to have a podcast or anything. Like, that's not what me. I don't do podcast or whatever. Like, I sing, I play.
Yeah,
and I'm really curious what those are going to be, because I'm like, if there's a better way for musicians to thank people, like, I want to be a part of that. I just haven't figured out anything else yet, and I also enjoy that. For my family and for what we've been through, it's sort of like documenting everything, but through audio and through the stories. So it's for our situation as a family band and all that. I find it very like, this fits great, and that might not be for everybody, and I actually imagine it won't be for everybody, like you said. But I can't wait to see the other ways, because they do need to interact and thank people if it's value for value. Otherwise, I don't know how long people will keep boosting your music if they feel like it's not meaningful to the artist.
It's exactly the same feeling of creating a podcast and feeling it's like just going out into the void, creating music, and it's just going out to the void. You're just like, what's happening? I don't know. I maybe see a number on the screen that tells me something's happened, but I don't know.
And this is the equivalent of...
It's the exact same.
Yeah, because if we got like a few streams on Spotify, but no one could say anything, like, that was actually me, and I really liked your song. Like, it just feels like nothing, like you said. So this...
Yes, correct.
Just a few people finding the like value, it's really, it keeps us going. And
yep,
because it's not all like, I hear something I've a pastor friend that I used to go to a church to a long time ago used to always say this: hey, it's not all about you, but it's some about you, right? So it's some about me. It's like, so I want to give value and give music to people, but it's also some about me, not all about me. I know life's not all about me. Like, I want to care for my family, care for my friends, care for people. I just want to be, a decent human being to any people I don't know, but So I don't know. I think like for you, like it's like, yeah, it's some about you, you're putting out your value and sharing your, thoughts and stories and the books you read. And you do need some feedback because it is some about you, and then you're getting it. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing that. It's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, I have so much advice for people, like new people coming on. It's going to take a while.
Mhm.
I'm doing the book reviews, for example. I've been doing that for ages, and I've maybe gotten, I don't know, 10 or 15 total in that. I don't know if it's the format. I don't know if it's the value. It's much more popular on YouTube, the videos, and
Yeah.
and so I've optimized more for YouTube. So therefore, you can't boostagram on YouTube. It's all these sorts of things. It's so much you have to consider.
Can people tip you
there is a
on
grind.
YouTube?
What's
Do
that?
people tip you on YouTube? Can they do that?
Are we even at that stage yet? I think
I don't know.
we've hit the subscriber amount, but we haven't hit the amount of hours per in a 90-day or
I'm not like super into that world, so like I don't tip people on
Yeah.
YouTube or anything. But I was like, I think people do it.
I know it's possible. I would need to
No,
make it much
you're good.
bigger on there,
I was
for
just
sure,
curious.
yeah.
That's cool though with
Yeah.
your book. So by the way, I downloaded all the reviews and listened to them of let's see, it was 12 Rules for Life and Gulag Archipelago, and there's another one or two books that I'd have to pull up on my phone.
That's what I like about the book reviews is we've covered so much now that if you're into romance, and because I cover pretty much all genres, the only thing I don't really read is recently released books. But man, I've read like Thomas Hardy romance, and then getting into like weird sci-fi stuff, and then old Stoics, and that's what I so much like about podcasting and probably the music as well. It's like, if people want to tune into the Doerfels, you can get bluegrass. Like you guys got bluegrass, and then if you want more pop, you've got pop stuff. If you want more romantic, sappy stuff, you've got it. You've got it all. It's so cool.
It's a cool mix, yeah. And I just wanted to compliment you on your book reviews, so they were really cool, and I liked them a lot. So,
thanks, man. Appreciate that. Let's start to wrap it up, maybe with regards to just some like family aspect, and this I suppose touches into the V4V as well. Have you noticed any like dynamics of the different distributions of like now that you've got splits versus when you were going out and having to divvy up perhaps cash that you get at performances, or if you're playing, you'd go get like an individual gig somewhere? Have you noticed any differences just between your family of even just like the simple act of splitting up money?
Honestly, the splits, while they're really cool and they have us all engaged, it's still not anything. The amount is not anything to the point where it's like, wow, we could stash this away like this, or this is a nice little boost. Like, I don't even know. I bet since we've been on Value for Value, they've made enough to maybe take their wives out for dinner. I a lot of the tracks, I'm like managing them. I'm not even on a lot of them. But it's like, since I started the band, and then I was like, guys, let me manage this for you. Let's just try Value for Value. Like, Adam Curry's doing this thing. Like, who knows? Like, if nothing happens, nothing happens. Like, I was just kind of like, let's just try it. Why not? Like, we have these songs that we can't share with anyone because I looked into putting them online, and I just don't even feel like it's worth it. Like, for Spotify. And
how many songs do you think you have?
Oh, there's over 50.
40.
Yeah, right now there's over 50.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But yeah, so,
and how much of those have you released as of today?
That's a great question. I would guess 15.
10 to 15.
Yeah, and then there's also the side stuff. So there's a little more than that, like the City Beach Ed's solo stuff, and Kurt has that big album of his beats. Yeah. So I mean, in the Doerfelverse, there is probably about 30 tracks out there, isn't there? Probably. I don't know the exact number, but that would be my guess right now. And it's great though. Here, my idea is to start getting together for the podcast, songwriting before, and then going on and eventually we're going to run out of stuff to talk about, and just having a smaller, shorter pod. Hey, here's what we're working on. Here's our, hey, thanks for boosting. So, thanks for the value. To have a little section of that, and then pick out a song. But, while we're doing that, we're still creating new songs, which is something that I'm really excited for, because now that we've all, we had this unique family band experience, and then we all kind of, whether we got discouraged and things fell apart, all these different things happened. And then we're like almost mad at music for a while because we like did it so hardcore and tried so hard. And then now we're kind of like, everyone got real jobs and stuff. And now we're like, oh, I can't wait to actually make some new music again. This is weird. I actually kind of was mad at music for a while. And I don't know. I can't explain that. Like we had this bitterness.
Inspirations come back.
Yeah, we had this like bitterness towards the whole scene, I think. And because there's like really awesome people, not even just us, the Doerfels, like we know some really awesome musicians and they're still like struggling. And it's like they're raw talent. Like there's people who we play with who you just sit in a room with and play with and amazing. And then there's people who go record, fix everything on a computer, and you play with in person. It's nothing. It's not without their gear. They're not what you thought they were, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not trying to bash that. Like we have technology to use, so use it and good job. But there is something about, especially the acoustic side, that I have a deep love for. I love all the music, but I really love the acoustic music. So I'm looking forward to, well, I'm sure we're still going to have many different styles. I'm looking forward to exploring the acoustic side of the Doerfelverse.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know.
That's so cool that you've kind of found that that passion again, and this for all of you as well. And that's kind of how I was somewhat viewing you guys as well, which is, you've got, almost like 10 different, well, I suppose because some of you didn't play in the band as much, 6, 7. Yeah. I saw 6 of you on stage and some of the videos. So at the very least 6.
And then there's Ed's wife, who's really good, and Kurt's wife, who's really good. So like there's other my
and even
kids,
my cousin Mike.
Mike's cool. Yeah, Mike's got some music in him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot.
So yeah, like I can definitely see that it'll still take a while to just kind of get everyone's backstories and then, transition onto maybe a new stage where it is you're creating your own new stuff, like new stuff, I guess, and releasing all that out as well, which is pretty cool. And I mean, like you mentioned, you've got your own family of your own, 4 kids getting to a 5th soon. I think.
That's right.
So, single-handedly saving the world from depopulation. Thank you, TJ. Much appreciated.
It started with my parents. Okay, I'm only half what they had.
We'll get there. And no, there's just so much cool stuff. I mean, like right now as we're speaking, Ainsley Costello is doing her second live gig. And
I didn't realize that. I did not realize that when we booked this. I'm really sorry if you meant to watch that.
No, that's cool. It was my. I mean, really, it's Adam and Dave's fault because that was why I'd put it on for yesterday, and that's all right. I got to tune into their the one they did yesterday, which was pretty cool. But once again, that's just like another person, like a hidden gem who's just found like a little bit of a niche, and they got. What was it? It was like 5 million sats, 5.5. I
saw the
just from a single.
Yeah, I saw the number of what it was that Bitcoin is worth, like, and it was like $2,000 or something. I was like, dang.
Yeah, it was like $2,500. Yeah. So, and that that's like one of the first live gig type things. You guys you do your podcast live as well, don't you?
Until I have it.
Is it out?
Until I have it figured out. Technically, to how I'm happy with it, I'm not really advertising it. Like sometimes I'll put it on No Agenda Social, like, hey, we're live at these links, but I'm not pinging the apps yet until I can have it smooth, because I don't want to make people I don't want to be like, hey, check it out, and they're like, well, that was kind of long and crazy,
there's like a lot of lag,
or just inconvenient.
I get you. I'm kind of doing the same. It's I'm getting better at getting live, but it is its own unique talent. You have to you have to get it.
Yeah,
a lot of preparation.
Absolutely.
to make it a nice smooth experience for sure.
Something interesting, and I've been listening to a lot of your recent episodes and things, and I used to think, I remember when I was on stage, 10 years ago, thinking like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. Like I found this is who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, obviously there's other parts of my life, but it was like, that felt like the main thing. And so when music ended for me, it was like, I mean, it's just like, I never thought I'd be doing anything else. It's really weird. And then I've heard you talking a lot about like searching, like what your next thing is and stuff. And I don't know, I just want to encourage you. You're doing an awesome job at your podcasts and podcasts and everything you're doing. And I look at things a little different now. I look at, music as, well, I was meant to do that then, and then I was meant to do other things, and now maybe I'm meant to do some music. Like it's kind of like, it's not like, oh, it's just that one thing brings me all the meaning in my life. It's like, I mean, it definitely brought meaning and did bring meaning and still does bring meaning, but it's like, I don't know. It's like, I'm still searching too, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's weird. It's a little bit, it'd be nice to be like, this is it. This is me, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever find that. And I don't know. I'm not sure, but
I don't think most people, there's some people who are like, they know they want to be a doctor when they're 5 years old, and that's all they want to do. And but that's such a rare individual. Most of us have to kind of muddle through life, and
but I just wanted to encourage
and
you,
try things out,
because I didn't even think we'd be going back to music and stuff like that. I really felt like, oh well, I'm gonna be a dad. I'm gonna be the best dad I can to my kids, and then maybe when I'm like old and like 60s, 70s, I'll be in my closet finding my little hobby, and then I'll like die. And nobody will know, and that'll be it. That was pretty grim, but that was in my mind for a while. I was like, oh, this is it, But
well, same encouragement back to you. Like I find just everything about what you guys are doing, your story, like your podcast is, it's so much fun, man. I really really love seeing it, and I'm like wishing you guys all the best to make it even just beyond that stage where it's just taking your wives out for a dinner, where it can be like something substantial.
Yeah, as far as
and I think it will.
Yeah, we're just enjoying, like I said, it's just getting the feedback from the individual listeners, and there's people out there. We haven't made, I mean, when people see some stats coming in, it's like, wow, that's really cool. But it still hasn't been, like I said, anything that could compare it. Like we have, like it's especially being split amongst sometimes the amount of ways it's being split for us, because there's a bunch of us.
Yeah,
it's just like, but it's really cool because I mean, we appreciate those people. It's again, it's we know we're not playing for like hundreds or thousands of people, but in a way we could be someday. We don't know. You know what I mean? And your podcast could have hundreds of thousands of listeners someday. You don't know. We don't know. But we do know we're being open and honest, and I think that will attract people, whether it just, maybe it's not going to be this big flashy thing like mainstream or whatever, but I think it's real, and I think when people start really thinking about life, they want real,
Yeah. I think you'd be surprised as well because you guys do reasonably well just in terms of like boostograms, people listening in, the music. It is still a small amount of people of the overall who listen in who actually take the steps of contributing back. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're already getting like hundreds of people listening in. It's just kind of hard to tell. You know, sometimes it's just a lot of people are just content to consume passively, which is fine. Mm-hmm. I'm glad they do, and once again, they can spread the love back in multiple other ways.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we'll end it for there today, TJ. I'm actually, I'm hoping to be in Nashville in end of July there's like a Bitcoin meetup / podcasting meetup thing. So I'll definitely definitely come see you in person.
We gotta get together.
For sure. If people are wanting to tune in to the Doerfels, where do you want to recommend them go to? Music?
Go to
website,
Doerfelverse.com. That's all DOERFEL verse VERSE.com. And that has links to just the whole, everybody going, all the solo, all the band stuff. And I again, everything's a work in progress, so I know I can make it better and get things going, but it's getting there just slowly. So appreciate everyone's patience.
Awesome. And yeah, if people if you've made it this far, would love for you to send some support in. Goes to me, goes to TJ, goes to the Mere Mortals in general, and really do appreciate all the support, and just hope more people get into value for value music and all the fun, wacky, crazy stuff that's going on with it.
Amen. Yeah.